Hungry and with a trembling voice, he asked for just a piece of bread, but found in the warrior's silence something much greater than food. Subscribe to the channel and see how an unlikely encounter can transform loneliness into true belonging. The fine rain fell like a veil of tears over the Minas Gerais savannah when the boy appeared among the twisted trees. Red mud stuck to his bare feet, and his worn clothes no longer had a defined color. In his eyes, he carried the emptiness of someone who had been abandoned many times. On his small hands were marks of early labor. He stopped in front of the broken gate of the old adobe house, where the thatched roof let wisps of smoke escape, and the bamboo fence no longer imposed limits. The boy hesitated, swallowed his fear along with his hunger, and then spoke in an almost inaudible voice, "Can I clean your house for a piece of bread?" The man who lived there was known as Seu Sebastião, a country caboclo of few words, who had lived isolated in that forgotten piece of the interior of Minas Gerais for years. No one saw him anymore at Sunday fairs or patroness festivals. The elders told that he had lost his son during a flood of the Rio das Almas, and since then had chosen silence as his only company. He was sitting next to the wood stove when he heard the request. He rose with slow movements, opened the creaking door and pointed to a piassava broom leaning in the corner. He didn't say a word. He just turned around, broke off a piece of cornbread and left it on the worn wooden table. The boy entered cautiously like an animal accustomed to traps. He cleaned the packed earth floor, collected dry leaves that the wind brought in, organized the faded cloths. Then he sat in the corner, ate slowly, chewing each piece as if it were the last, and stayed there waiting to be expelled. But Seu Sebastião merely returned to his place by the fire, lighting a hand-rolled cigarette. At the end of the day, with a dry nod of his head, he indicated that the boy could sleep on the mat by the wall. And he slept, curled up like a seed awaiting the right time. In the days that followed, a silent routine was established without agreement or words. The boy, whose name was Tiago, would wake before sunrise, sweep the yard, fetch water from the stream, help split wood with an axe almost larger than his arms. Seu Sebastião observed, his eyes deep and attentive. Gradually he began to show simple gestures, how to prepare traps for small animals, how to recognize herbs that cure fevers and pains, how to listen to the wind before the storm. There were no caresses, but there was presence, something that Tiago knew little of in his 9 years of life. The dry winter of the savannah was giving way to the first rains when Dona Zephyr appeared. She was the most respected healer in those parts, a woman with worn hands and a gaze that pierced souls. She brought with her a bundle of leaves and roots. "Sebastião, I've come to bring medicine for your rheumatism," she said, entering without asking permission, as those who know the paths of others' pain do. When she saw Tiago, she stopped. Her eyes narrowed as if recognizing something important. "And this boy?" she asked. Seu Sebastião continued stirring the coffee on the stove. "He appeared," was all he said. Dona Zephyr approached Tiago, who shrank against the wall. She didn't touch him, just observed the marks on his arms, the way he looked at the ground, the almost imperceptible tremor. "Have they come looking for him?" she asked the caboclo. "Not yet," replied Sebastião, "but they will." Tiago didn't understand what they were talking about, but he felt the chill in his stomach that he always felt when it was time to run away again. That night, while the boy slept, Dona Zephyr and Seu Sebastião talked in low voices. She told him about the orphanage in the city, about rumors of mistreatment, about children who disappeared. She spoke of the new director, a man from the capital with political connections, who had been reforming the place with an iron hand. "They say this boy escaped 3 weeks ago. They're searching everywhere." Seu Sebastião looked at the sleeping form on the mat. "They won't find him here," he stated. Dona Zephyr sighed. "Sebastião, they have the law on their side. And you know how the law works in these parts." The old caboclo got up, went to a dark wooden chest and took out a yellowed paper. He handed it to the healer, who read it with difficulty by the light of the lantern. Her eyes widened. "Why did you never tell me this?" she asked. He just put the paper back. "Some pains we bury deep," he said. The next morning, when Tiago returned from the stream carrying water, he found Seu Sebastião sitting on a tree stump, carving something on a piece of arara wood. The boy placed the water can on the ground and stood watching the calloused hands transform the wood with the tip of a knife. For hours the old man worked in silence, while Tiago took care of daily tasks. At night, by the fire, Seu Sebastião told a story. It was about a man who had lost everything during a great flood, but had found an IP seed buried in the mud, and that seed, with time and care, became a strong tree, which protected his house and announced spring with yellow flowers that looked like pieces of sun. Tiago listened with his eyes fixed on the flame, absorbing each word like dry earth absorbs rain. Then, in a whisper that barely left his lips, he asked, "Can I be a seed too?" Seu Sebastião responded with a simple gesture. He took from his pocket the small pendant he had carved during the day, a miniature EP, and placed it around the boy's neck. He didn't say what it meant, but at that moment, without words, something was passed between them. A silent agreement that needed no explanation. 12 days later, they arrived. The City Hall jeep raised dust on the dirt road, bringing the orphanage director and a court officer. They stopped in the yard, looking with contempt at the simplicity of the place. When they knocked on the door, Seu Sebastião was already waiting, standing with Tiago half hidden behind him. "We've come to collect the minor Tiago Oliveira Santos, fugitive from the state institution," said the man in the worn suit, extending a paper with stamps and signatures. "We have a court order." The court officer, a man from the region who knew Seu Sebastião's quiet reputation, maintained a respectful distance. The director, however, took a step forward. "This brat ran away after destroying public property. He'll pay dearly when he returns." Seu Sebastião didn't take the paper. He didn't say anything. He just stood there like an ancient épée that no wind can uproot. The boy was holding tightly to the hem of the old man's shirt, his knuckles white with tension. "You have 5 days to hand over the minor, or we'll come back with the police," threatened the director. "You'll answer for kidnapping." Before Seu Sebastião could respond, the sound of a cart made everyone turn. Donna Zephyr was arriving, accompanied by 2 other women from the village. "What a coincidence," she said, descending with surprising agility for her 70 years. "I've just come to bring some documents to my friend Sebastião." She entered the house without ceremony, ignoring the director's protests. Inside, she took an envelope from inside her blouse and handed it to Seu Sebastião. "It's time to use it," she said simply. Meanwhile, the other women surrounded the director, talking loudly about the weather, about the last church festival, about how he looked tired. Wouldn't he like some coffee? The 5 days that followed were filled with tense waiting. Tiago barely slept, startling at any night noise. Seu Sebastião started sleeping in the chair by the door, an old shotgun within reach. During the day, he taught Tiago how to hide in the forest, which fruits could be eaten, how to follow the watercourse without leaving tracks. The boy absorbed everything with attentive eyes, but at night, when he thought no one was watching, he cried silently on the mat. It was on the eve of the final deadline that the rain began. First fine, then in dense curtains that transformed the yard into a red mud puddle. Lightning cut through the dark sky, and thunder made the old house tremble. Tiago huddled in the corner, his eyes wide with fear. Seu Sebastião, noticing the boy's terror, slowly approached and sat beside him. For the first time, he placed his hand on Tiago's thin shoulder. "There are things we need to face in order to cross," he said in a low voice. "Like a storm." And then, as the rain battered the thatched roof, Seu Sebastião told his story. He spoke of his son, Joaquim, who was almost Tiago's age when the great flood of the Rio das Almas took him. He spoke of his wife, Aparecida, who withered from sadness in the months that followed. He spoke of the guilt he carried for not being able to hold his son's hand when the current pulled him away. And for the first time in many years, Sebastião cried, silent tears that mingled with the rain that entered through the cracks in the roof. Tiago, not knowing what to do, simply rested his head on the old man's arm. There they stayed in silence until both fell asleep, exhausted by the shared emotion. By dawn, the deadline had expired, and with it, the rain. The sun was timidly emerging between scattered clouds when the sound of vehicles broke the morning silence. It wasn't just the City Hall jeep this time. There was also a police car and a black car that Tiago immediately recognized, the orphanage director's car. His heart raced with fear. Seu Sebastião was already up, dressed in his least worn shirt and the straw hat he wore only on special occasions. "Stay behind me," he told the boy as he opened the door to face the visitors. In the muddy yard, the director and the court officer descended from the vehicles, accompanied by 2 policemen. One of them, Sergeant Peixoto, had known Seu Sebastião for a long time and seemed uncomfortable with the situation. "Sebastião," he said by way of greeting, touching the brim of his cap. "Dr. Antenor here has a court order to collect the boy." The court officer extended the paper, which danced slightly in the morning breeze. "The deadline is over, Seu Sebastião," he said in a neutral voice. "We have to take the minor." The orphanage director, a fat man with a thin mustache, smiled with disdain. "I hope you didn't think you could simply keep the brat. The law is on my side." Seu Sebastião didn't move from the doorway. Tiago, trembling, clung to his shirt, his eyes fixed on the man who represented months of nightmare at the orphanage. "Law isn't always justice," Sebastião finally replied, his calm voice contrasting with the tension in the air. The director laughed. "Hillbilly philosophy. Bring the brat," he ordered the policeman. Sergeant Peixoto hesitated, looking at his younger colleague, who took a step forward. It was then that a female voice cut through the air. "One moment." Everyone turned to see Dona Zefa arriving in her cart, accompanied by a thin man in a worn suit carrying a leather briefcase. "This is Dr. Arlindo Teixeira, attorney," she announced as the man descended from the cart with precise movements. "He has something to say about this case." The lawyer opened his briefcase and removed a document. "I have here a court order suspending the reintegration of the minor Tiago Oliveira Santos to the state orphanage, based on allegations of mistreatment and inadequate conditions. I also have a provisional custody process in the name of Sebastião Pereira dos Santos." He extended the papers to the court officer, who examined them with an increasingly surprised expression. The orphanage director snatched the documents from the officer's hand. "This is absurd. Who paid for this? Where did this lawyer come from?" His gaze oscillated between anger and panic. Dona Zefa took a step forward, her black eyes fixed on the director's. "I've known for a long time what happens in that place. The children who disappear, the accidents, the money that vanishes. I have grandchildren, Mr. Antenor, and they have friends who went through that hell." Seu Sebastião remained motionless, one hand on Tiago's shoulder, as if he could protect him with just that touch. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Additionally, I would like to present another document." He removed a yellowed paper from his briefcase, carefully preserved inside a plastic cover. "This is the birth certificate of Joaquim Pereira dos Santos, son of Sebastião Pereira dos Santos and Aparecida Conceição dos Santos, born on May 15, 1985, deceased on February 4, 1994. He paused, looking directly at Tiago. "And this is the birth certificate of Tiago Oliveira Santos, born on August 23, 2015, son of Maria Oliveira Santos and—" He hesitated, looking at Sebastião, who nodded slightly. "And Joaquim Pereira dos Santos." A heavy silence fell over the yard. The court officer looked from the papers to Seu Sebastião, then to Tiago, connecting the dots. "The boy is your grandson?" he finally asked. Sebastião didn't answer immediately. He looked at Tiago, who stared at him with eyes widened in surprise. "I didn't know," the old man finally said. "I didn't know until he appeared at my door. But when I saw him, he had my Joaquim's eyes." Dona Zefa approached. "Maria died in childbirth. Her family gave the boy to the state, not knowing that the father had family. When Tiago appeared here, I recognized him. I've always been a midwife in these parts. I remember every child I helped to be born." The orphanage director crumpled the papers in his hands. "This is a farce. You forged these documents. This hillbilly can barely read. How would he recognize a birth certificate?" The lawyer smiled coldly. "The originals have already been presented to the judge, Mr. Antenor, and a DNA test has already been requested, although I believe it's enough to look at the two of them to see the relationship." Indeed, beneath the dirt and fear, Tiago's features bore a resemblance to Sebastião's. The same eye shape, the same determined chin. Sergeant Peixoto took a step back. "Dr. Antenor, with these documents we cannot take the boy." He looked at the court officer, who nodded in agreement. "The previous court order is suspended." The director exploded in threats, speaking of political connections, of consequences, of revenge that would come. But his voice lost power before the wall of silence that Seu Sebastião, Dona Zefa, and the other inhabitants of the place erected around him. Finally, defeated, He got into the black car and left, raising dust. The policeman and the officer left soon after, with promises to return to check on Tiago's living conditions. When everyone had left, Tiago looked at Seu Sebastião with eyes full of questions. "Are you really my grandfather?" The old caboclo knelt with difficulty, coming to the boy's eye level. "I didn't know I had a grandson," he said with a choked voice, "but when I saw you I felt something in here." He placed his hand on his chest, as if a part of Joaquim had returned. Tiago, for the first time since he had arrived, threw himself into the old man's arms, letting the tears flow freely. Seu Sebastião held him tightly, as if he feared that a new flood might take him away. Dona Zefa observed the scene with teary eyes. "Life has these turns," she said. "Sometimes it brings back what we thought we had lost forever." That night was different from all the previous ones. Seu Sebastião unlocked the old dark wooden chest and showed Tiago the few memories he kept of his son. A small collection of marbles, a slingshot, a faded photo where a boy smiled next to a young couple. "Your father," he said, pointing to the boy in the photo. "And that was your grandmother Aparecida." Tiago touched the photo reverently. "Did he look like me?" he asked. Sebastião smiled, his first genuine smile in many years. Exactly the same. He had the same way of furrowing his brow when he was thinking. That night Tiago didn't sleep on the mat. Seu Sebastião improvised a bed with 2 crates and a straw mattress that Dona Zefa had brought. He covered the boy with a patchwork quilt and hesitantly ran his hand through his grandson's disheveled hair. "Sleep peacefully," he said. "Tomorrow we have much to do." Tiago nodded, his eyes already heavy with sleep. Before falling asleep, he held the small épée pendant that hung from his neck. "Now I understand," he murmured. "I'm the seed you found in the mud." Seu Sebastião stayed there watching his grandson sleep, allowing himself to believe that perhaps the cycle of loss and loneliness had finally been broken. Outside, the new moon promised a new cycle, while crickets and frogs composed the nocturnal symphony of the savannah. For the first time in years, the old caboclo felt peace, a peace that came not from the absence of pain, but from the presence of something stronger than it, the chance to begin again. When the first rays of sun touched the yard the following morning, Tiago was already up, sweeping the red earth with rhythmic movements. He observed the road that led to the village, thinking about how many times he had dreamed of escaping, of finding a place he could call home. He had never imagined that this place would be an adobe house in the middle of the savannah with a grandfather he didn't know existed. The following weeks brought subtle and profound changes. The adobe house gained curtains in the windows, made from flour sacks that Dona Zefa dyed with annatto. The yard now had a small garden, where Tiago planted seeds of coriander, chives, and cassava under Seu Sebastião's patient guidance. The mat was replaced by a real bed, bought in the city with money that the old man kept under his mattress. But not everything was peaceful in this new beginning. The orphanage director, Antenor Silveira, was not a man to accept defeat. 32 days after the confrontation in the yard, Seu Sebastião was called to the city courthouse. The judge, Dr. Emmanuel Fontes, wanted to hear his version of the facts personally before deciding on Tiago's permanent custody. "We have 20 days until the hearing," explained Attorney Arlindo, sitting at the simple kitchen table. "The director is moving all his influences. He says you don't have the conditions to raise a child, that you live in precarious conditions, that you can't provide formal education to the boy." So Sebastião listened in silence, his calloused hands resting on the table. Tiago, sitting beside him, felt fear growing again. 20 days. 20 days to prove that this simple place was better than the orphanage, with its painted walls and hidden abuses. "What do we need to do?" Sebastião finally asked. The lawyer adjusted his glasses on his thin nose. "First, prove that you have means of support. Second, show that Tiago is well cared for with access to school and healthcare. Third," he hesitated. "Third, we need witnesses who speak well of you, who attest to your character." Sebastião nodded slowly. Means of support he had. His small rural pension, chicken raising, the garden that sold surplus at the fair. Health wasn't a problem either, with the medical post in the village less than an hour's walk away. But school and witnesses. He had lived as a recluse for so many years that he doubted anyone besides Dona Zefa would remember him fondly. News of the hearing spread quickly through the village. The following Sunday, when Sue, Sebastião and Tiago went to Mass, the first in years for the old man, curious glances followed them. Some hostile, others supportive, most simply intrigued by the story of the reclusive caboclo and his newly discovered grandson. After the ceremony, Father Antonio called the two to the sacristy. "Sebastião," he said in a grave voice, "it's been a long time since I've seen you in the church pews." The old man removed his hat, embarrassed. "Faith became weak after I lost my son, Father." The religious man nodded with understanding. "And now, you found your grandson and faith returned." Sebastião looked at Tiago, who was curiously exploring the liturgical vestments. "Faith is still returning slowly, but the will to live returned more quickly." The priest smiled. "I heard about the hearing. You know I don't support lies, Sebastião. Is this boy really your grandson?" The old man faced the priest firmly. "In blood, yes. In heart, even more." Father Antonio observed the two for a long moment. "I'll make an exception and enroll Tiago in the parish school, even with the school year already started. And I'll testify in your favor at the hearing." That night, as they returned home, Seu Sebastião realized that something had changed within him. The isolation he had cultivated for years as protection now seemed like a prison. For Tiago, he was willing to return to the world of the living, to face glances and questions, to relive painful memories. The next morning, Tiago began attending the parish school. He went on foot with other children from the surroundings, carrying a simple lunchbox and new notebooks bought at the city stationery store. He returned in the afternoon full of stories and questions, with lessons that Sebastião often didn't know how to answer. "Grandpa, what is photosynthesis?" he would ask. Or why does the river always flow to the sea? The old man, who had barely completed elementary school, felt the weight of his own ignorance. But instead of closing off, he sought help. He asked Dona Zefa to take him to the municipal library, where timidly he borrowed books. At night, by the light of the lantern, grandfather and grandson pored over the pages, learning together about the world beyond the savannah. The days passed too quickly. The date of the hearing approached, and with it grew the apprehension. Antonio Silveira had not remained idle. His black car was seen several times in the city, stopping at the mayor's house, at the registry office, at the judge's office. Rumors about Sebastião's past began to circulate. They said he drank, that he was violent, that his son's death was not accidental. Dona Zefa brought the news, concerned. "They're poisoning people's ears against you, compadre." Sebastião listened to everything, with the closed expression that Tiago already knew well, the same one he had when a storm was approaching. "Truth has its own strength," he would only reply. But at night, when he thought the boy was asleep, the old caboclo would go out to the yard and stand looking at the stars, as if seeking answers in the immense sky of the hinterland. There were only 5 days left, until the hearing, when the worst happened. Tiago didn't return from school at the usual time. Sebastião waited anxiously, then traveled the path to the school, asking each child he met. No one had seen the boy after the last bell. In the empty courtyard of the parish school, he found Tiago's backpack abandoned near the side gate. The bag was open, the notebook scattered as if it had been dropped during a run. The old man's heart skipped a beat. He ran to the police station, where Sergeant Peixoto listened to his account with growing concern. "I'll send a patrol car to check the orphanage," he said, "and organize a search around the school." But Sebastião knew by instinct where to look. He didn't wait for the police. He went straight to Antonio Silveira's house, an imposing construction in the upper part of the city. He knocked on the door forcefully, ignoring the electric doorbell. No one answered, but a neighbor approached, curious about the commotion. "If you're looking for Dr. Antonio, he left an hour ago, by car, in a hurry. He had a child in the back seat." Sebastião's blood froze in his veins. "Where to?" he asked in a hoarse voice. The neighbor shrugged. "I don't know, but I heard the engine start in the direction of the old road, the one that goes to the Rio das Almas valley." Rio das Almas, the same river that had taken his son decades ago. Sebastião felt his legs weaken. He ran to the small store on the corner and used the public telephone to alert Sergeant Peixoto. Then, without waiting for a response, he hitched a ride with a truck driver who was heading to the valley region. Night was falling when he reached the banks of the Rio das Almas. The water was flowing strongly due to recent rains, and the sound of the current brought memories that he had fought to bury for years. Sebastian closed his eyes for a moment, reliving the day when he couldn't hold on to Joachim. His son's scream still echoed in his nightmares. No, he wouldn't lose Tiago too. Not to the same river, not to the same pain. He began to walk along the bank, calling for his grandson. His hoarse voice barely stood out from the rumor of the waters. Darkness was advancing rapidly, making the search even more difficult. It was then that he heard a muffled cry, coming from an abandoned building near the old bridge. It was an old pump house, used decades ago for the region's water supply. Sebastian approached cautiously. The door was locked from the outside with a rusty padlock. "Tiago," he called, putting his ear to the rotten wood. The crying stopped, replaced by a trembling voice. "Grandpa, is that you?" Relief almost knocked the old man down. "It's me, son. I'll get you out of there." He looked around, searching for something he could use to break the padlock. He found a large stone and began to strike the hardware with all the strength his aged arms allowed. The noise attracted attention. Headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating Sebastião in his desperation. From the approaching car, Antenor Silveira descended. "Get away from that door, old man," he ordered, drawing a revolver from his waist. "The brat stays here until after the hearing. Without him, you have no case." Sebastião slowly put down the stone, turning to face the man. Even in the half-light, he could see the hatred in the director's eyes. "Why?" he simply asked. "Why do this to a child?" Antenor gave a dry laugh. "You don't understand, do you? That orphanage is my golden goose. Each child represents government funds, company donations, money that passes through my hands before becoming rationed food and second-hand clothes." He pointed the gun at Sebastião's chest. "And this brat especially knows too much. He saw things he shouldn't have in my office. Documents, false records." Inside the pump house, Tiago was screaming, pounding on the door. Sebastião kept his eyes fixed on Antenor, calculating the distance between them. He was old, but he still knew the savannah like the palm of his hand. If he could reach the dense forest that bordered the river. "It won't work," said Antenor, as if reading his thoughts. "You won't leave here, and after the current takes your body, I'll say you kidnapped the boy. That you were crazy, obsessed with the idea of replacing your dead son." He took a step forward, steadying his aim. "No one will doubt it. After all, you're just an old lonely caboclo." It was then that a headlight cut through the darkness again. Not one, but several. Cars and motorcycles were approaching on the dirt road, raising dust. Antenor turned, momentarily distracted. It was enough. Sebastião advanced with the quickness of one who knows the value of a second, grabbing the director's armed arm. The two men fell to the ground, fighting for control of the gun. A shot echoed in the night, startling the birds sleeping in the nearby trees. The first vehicle stopped abruptly, and from it descended Sergeant Peixoto and Dona Zefa. Right behind came other cars, bringing Father Antonio, Attorney Arlindo, and several village residents. "Sebastião!" shouted Dona Zefa, running in the direction of the fallen men. Antenor got up first, the gun still in his hand. But now he was surrounded. Sergeant Peixoto drew his own weapon. "Drop the revolver, Dr. Antenor," he ordered in a firm voice. "It's over." The director looked around, seeing himself surrounded by hostile faces. His empire was crumbling before his eyes. With a sudden movement, he pointed the gun at the pump house where Tiago was trapped. "If I can't have him, no one will," he shouted. It was his last mistake. Before he could pull the trigger, Sebastião, even wounded by a grazing shot to the shoulder, threw himself against his legs. Antenor fell again, and this time the gun flew from his hand, falling into the dark waters of the river. Sergeant Peixoto and two other men immobilized the director, while Dona Zefa ran to help Sebastião. "Tiago," murmured the old man, trying to get up. "He's locked in there." Father Antonio was already attacking the padlock with a crowbar found in the trunk of his car. With a snap, the rust gave way and the door opened. Tiago came out staggering, his eyes red from crying, his face dirty with dust and tears. When he saw his grandfather fallen, he ran in his direction, throwing himself over him with a sob that seemed to come from the depths of his soul. "Grandpa, you're hurt." Sebastião embraced his grandson with his good arm, feeling the small trembling body against his. "It's nothing," he murmured. "I've been through worse." Dona Zefa was examining the wound with a worried expression. "We need to take you to the hospital, compadre. You're bleeding a lot." Sebastião didn't answer. He just held Tiago tighter, as if he feared the boy might disappear if he let go. He looked at the dark river, then at the starry sky. For a moment he had the strange sensation that Joaquim was there somehow, watching everything. Perhaps it was just the fatigue, perhaps it was the blood loss, but he felt an inexplicable peace even amid the pain. "Let's go home," he finally said. The hearing to determine Tiago's custody took place not in the city courthouse, but in the regional hospital where Sebastião was recovering from his wound. Judge Emmanuel Fontes, a middle-aged man with tired eyes that had already seen too much human misery, listened to the testimonies attentively. The improvised hall in the administrative wing of the hospital was full. Village residents, parish school teachers, even the doctor who had attended to Sebastião, all wanted to testify. Antenor Silveira was not present. After the events at the banks of the Rio das Almas, investigations revealed a scheme of embezzlement at the orphanage that had extended for years. Ghost children in the records, donations that never reached those in need, false reports sent to the authorities. The director now occupied a cell in the capital's jail, awaiting trial on multiple charges. When it was Tiago's turn to speak, the judge asked everyone to leave, leaving only the boy Sebastião. Found the magistrate himself in the room. "Tiago," the judge began in a soft voice, "I want you to tell me in your own words where you want to live and why." The boy, dressed in borrowed but clean clothes, looked at his grandfather lying on the hospital stretcher and then at the judge. "I want to stay with my grandfather," he said simply. "He teaches me important things." "What things?" asked the judge, leaning slightly forward. Tiago thought for a moment. "He teaches me to listen to the wind before the rain, to plant by the right moon, to respect the elders and the animals, to fix broken things." He paused, playing with the EPA pendant he never removed from his neck. "And he taught me that family isn't just who is born together, but who chooses to stay together even when it's difficult." Judge Emmanuel looked long at the boy, then at the old caboclo who was watching him with moist eyes. "You know, Tiago," he finally said, "I think your grandfather is also learning a lot from you." That same afternoon, the judge signed Tiago's permanent custody in the name of Sebastião Pereira dos Santos. The news spread quickly through the village, and when the two returned home a week later, they found the yard clean, the garden tended, and an improvised banner that said, "Welcome back." Donna Zefa and the community women had organized a small collective effort to arrange the house. There were new curtains in the windows, a proper bed for Tiago, and even a bookshelf with books donated by the municipal library. Life resumed its course, but now at a different rhythm. Sebastião, previously reclusive, began to frequent the Sunday fair, bringing products from the garden that he and Tiago cultivated together. The old caboclo began to participate in community meetings, offering his wisdom about medicinal plants and planting seasons. At home, grandfather and grandson developed a routine that balanced the old and the new. In the morning, Tiago went to school. In the afternoon, he helped with the farm chores and learned traditional knowledge from his grandfather. At night, they made the reverse journey. It was the boy who taught what he had learned at school, helping Sebastião to improve his reading and to understand subjects he had never been able to study formally. The seasons passed, transforming the savannah with its colors and textures. Sebastião's wound healed, leaving only a mark that bothered him on rainy days. The city orphanage was reformed and began to be administered by a community board, with active participation from Father Antonio and Donna Zefa. The children who previously lived under Antenor's regime of terror now received genuine care, quality education, and, when possible, were reintegrated into their families or carefully selected adoptive homes. It was on an August afternoon, when the savannah was beginning to bloom, announcing the end of the drought, that Seu Sebastião made an unusual proposal. "Tiago," he called the boy who was playing with a slingshot in the yard. "Come here. I want to show you something." The boy, now almost 11, ran to his grandfather. Sebastião extended a folded paper, yellowed by time. "Do you know what this is?" Tiago took the paper carefully, opening it slowly. It was a hand-drawn map, showing the course of the Rio das Almas and the lands around it. A red point marked a location near the source. "It's a map, Grandpa," Sebastião nodded. "It's the map of the land where I was born, where your father was born too." He pointed to the red point. "It's a 2-day journey from here upriver. It's a piece of good land with clean water and dense forest. It belonged to my father, and his father before him." He paused, looking at the horizon where the sun was beginning to set. "I left there after your father, after he was gone. I couldn't bear the memories." Tiago looked from the map to his grandfather, gradually understanding the meaning of it all. "Do you want to go back there?" Sebastian smiled, messing up his grandson's hair. "I want to know if you want to see the place. If you do, we can rebuild the old house, plant a new field, maybe even take other children from the orphanage to spend time there, learn to live with the land." The boy's eyes widened. "Like a school?" "More or less," replied the grandfather. "A school where you learn what isn't in books. Where city children can learn the rhythm of nature, the names of plants, the songs of birds." Tiago was silent for a moment, imagining the possibility. Then he took hold of the EP pendant he wore around his neck. "Like that story you told me? Of the seed that became a tree?" Sebastian nodded, moved by the memory the boy had kept. "Exactly. Sometimes a single seed can transform everything around it." The next morning, they began preparations for the journey. The news spread quickly, and soon several people offered to help rebuild the old Pereira dos Santos property. Father Antonio blessed the undertaking and promised regular visits to celebrate masses in the future community. Donna Zephyr, despite her advanced age, insisted on accompanying them on the inaugural journey. "Someone needs to cook for you, you hard-headed men," she said in her bossy way that barely disguised her affection. 2 months later, a small caravan left the village heading toward the source of the Rio das Almas, carts loaded with tools, seeds, provisions, and dreams. At the front, Sebastião and Tiago walked side by side, the old caboclo leaning on a staff of aroeira wood, the boy carrying the map that would guide them to the past to build a future. When they finally reached the location marked on the map, they found only ruins of the old house and an immense yellow ipe that dominated the abandoned yard. It was the beginning of spring, and the tree was covered with golden flowers that fell like a delicate rain with the gentle breeze. "Look, Grandpa," exclaimed Tiago, running to the ipe. "It's just like my pendant." Sebastião approached slowly, touching the gnarled trunk with the palm of his hand like one greeting an old friend. "It was my father who planted this ipe on the day I was born," he recounted. "He said that the tree and I would grow together, and that as long as the ipe bloomed, our family would be protected." He looked up where the blue sky appeared among the flowery branches. "It resisted all this time, even with no one to care for it." Tiago hugged the thick trunk, feeling the rough texture of the bark. "Now we're going to take care of it, aren't we, Grandpa?" Sebastião smiled, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced for a long time. "We will, my son, and it will take care of us too." In the years that followed, the place flourished. The house was rebuilt, larger and more solid, with help from neighbors and friends from the village. A rural school was erected under the protective shade of the ipe, where Seu Sebastião taught the traditional knowledge of the savannah, and Tiago, who was growing quickly in height and wisdom, helped with the formal lessons he learned during the periods he attended the city school. Children from the orphanage came in small groups for periods of learning, returning to the city with eyes bright with discoveries and hands calloused from real experiences. Donna Zephyr, now quite elderly but still lucid, coordinated the medicinal garden and taught the girls and boys the healing power of native plants. The Rio das Almas, which had once taken Sebastião's son, now brought new life to the community that grew around it. Its waters irrigated the plantations, refreshed tired bodies after work, cradled stories told at dusk. The pain didn't completely disappear, and it never does, but it transformed into something new, like the humus that is born from decomposition and allows new lives to sprout. Instead of isolating himself with his suffering, Sebastião learned to share it, transforming it into wisdom that could guide the younger ones. On full moon nights, when the community gathered around the fire to tell stories, the old caboclo sometimes spoke of his lost son, of how he loved to swim in the river and climb trees, of how his laughter echoed through the forest. And in doing so, he kept Joaquim alive in the collective memory. As part of the history of that place, Tiago grew strong and sensitive, with his feet firmly planted on the ground and his eyes turned toward the horizon. At 16, he was almost as tall as his grandfather, and carried within him a rare mixture of knowledge. He knew how to read the stars as well as science books, how to prepare remedies with herbs as well as solve mathematical equations. One afternoon, as they worked together repairing the school roof, Tiago asked his grandfather, "Have you ever thought about how it would have been if I hadn't appeared at your door that rainy day?" Sebastião stopped working, wiping the sweat from his forehead with his forearm. He looked at his grandson, then at the community that extended around them, the simple but dignified houses, the school with its yard, full of children, the community garden where women and men worked together, the fruit trees they had planted years ago and that now provided shade and food. "Sometimes," he finally answered, "life gives us a second chance when we least expect it. I was dying inside, Tiago, dying slowly day by day without realizing it." He placed his hand on his grandson's shoulder. "You brought me back. Not just to life, but to this place that I had abandoned out of fear of pain. And look what we've managed to do together." Tiago smiled, adjusting the EPE pendant that, even after all those years, he still wore around his neck. The small symbol carved in wood had darkened with time and constant use, acquiring the patina of truly loved objects. "We planted many seeds, didn't we?" Sebastião nodded, looking at the centennial Ipe that now sheltered a new generation of nests in its branches. The yellow flowers continued to fall like golden blessings on the land that had once again been cultivated. "And they transformed into a forest," he completed. That night, when the community gathered for the harvest celebration, Seu Sebastião observed his grandson sitting among the young people, telling stories to the smaller children. Tiago was no longer the frightened boy who had appeared at his door years ago. He was a young man with purpose and roots, someone who understood the value of the land, of community, of continuity. Someday, when Sebastião was no longer there, it would be Tiago who would tell the stories by the fire. It would be he who would teach the new generations how to listen to the wind before the rain, how to respect the rhythm of the seasons, how to honor those who came before. And so the cycle would continue. One day, perhaps another lost child would knock at the door seeking shelter. And Tiago, remembering his own story, would open the door and point to the broom in the corner. Because he knew, sometimes all a life needs is a silent gesture of welcome. And in that land, between the Ipe and the river, honor remained alive, passed from hand to hand, from heart to heart, from silence to silence. If this narrative touched your heart, don't keep that feeling just for yourself. Leave your like, comment on what moved you the most, and subscribe to the channel to receive more stories that, like IP seeds, can bloom in your memory and transform your day. Just as Seu Sebastião and Tiago shared their knowledge with the community, share this story with those who need to hear about new beginnings and second chances.